The amount that's being spent on large language models is phenomenal, but they're still not trustable. And we're still spending a minuscule amounts in medical imaging, but we
Yeah.
expect them to be 100% correct. What's your thoughts on technology behind the two?
I think the money goes where the people's interest is and where you can see the immediate value. So, like you said, with large language models at the moment, so many people are interested and they can see so much potential. With radiology, I think there's a huge amount of potential, but it's apples and oranges here. I don't think you can compare the two. There's still a huge opportunity for AI in radiology to improve people's lives, and there'll still be money going to it. But it is an apples and oranges comparison. I don't think you should be expecting the same from both, even though the trust steps are going to be similar for both.
Welcome to MIAI, the podcast about medical imaging and artificial intelligence. Sit down with the most brilliant voices in radiology and AI to discover how technology is reshaping healthcare delivery today.
There's a lot of hype around radiology AI, but what does it actually mean for a radiology practice? We've identified the top questions a radiology practice manager wants to get answered about AI in their practice. Now, Chee works in a practice, so I'm going to ask him the hard questions directly. I'm optimistic about AI being a powerful tool in radiology, and I think it will grow practices, not shrink them. But let's see if Chee agrees. Welcome, Chee. Lots of questions for you today. Thanks for coming along. You're looking forward to it?
Yes, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Well, I can't run it without you, so I don't think you need to thank me. Thank you for coming along. You're going to be the one answering the hard stuff today. So are you ready to dive straight in?
Let's take a dive, Stephen.
So here's one I've heard lots of times. Is AI going to replace radiologists? Is it going to get rid of how many we need? For instance, if I'm running a radiology practice, is it going to make me have to fire people? What are your thoughts?
Stephen, you hit the hard questions early, don't you? Great question. A question that, like you said, gets asked a lot. I have a question for you, Stephen. When you fly on a plane, the autopilot can pretty much take off, land all by itself.
Yep.
Are there still pilots in the air?
Yeah, there's still pilots in there. That's a great analogy I hadn't thought of. Yes, and I don't think anybody would trust a plane if it was without a pilot up the front. So I guess that's where you're going. You still need somebody to read these scans, even if it's helped by AI. Is that right?
Agreed. I think AI will help reduce the burden, but I don't think it will remove the radiologists. Similarly, back in the olden days, back in the old planes, if you ever remember, you had the two pilots, you had the engineers sitting there filling with engines and everything else. You don't have that anymore because automation has come and has reduced the need for that third engineer.
So you're saying it will reduce the need for radiologists, even if not the core ones, the ancillary ones?
Agreed. I think it will reduce the number of radiologists required because it may streamline a few processes, help us report a few things, but there will still be necessary oversight from a radiologist, which is what the pilot provides airlines.
Okay, so we're going to speed up what a radiologist is doing. And if we're not getting rid of people so much, then that means we're doing more with the time?
Yes, I believe AI will reduce the burden on a radiologist, mean that they can get through more work in the future. But I don't think we've reached that nirvana yet.
Yeah. And look, and I don't think there's an issue for demand because radiology firms are growing and the demand for radiologists has been high for a long time and population is just getting older. So from what you're telling me, it sounds like it's going to make their job easier. We're going to be able to get through more stuff, but you still need the radiologist. They're still essential to trust and we need more anyway. So it sounds like it's good news, not bad news.
I totally agree with you there. I think it is good news and not bad news. Have we reached that stage yet? I think we are still a little bit away from that. As a technologist, you probably understand that these things take time and money to develop. Currently in AI, I can ask you this question. We have a lot of money being spent on large language models. A lot of AI. You hear ChatGPT get thrown around right, left, and center. I mean, these are just some of the figures being thrown out. Amazon's spending
Yep.
125 billion, Google spending an extra 180 billion, Microsoft 94 billion, and OpenAI spending roughly $1 trillion in infrastructure and partnerships. And yet, Stephen, I have used ChatGPT, and sometimes it gives amazing answers, and sometimes it gives me a lot of made up answers. And there's many cases where people have been caught out by it. It needs a human oversight at this moment in time. And I pose to you, if there's so much money being spent on AI and large language models,
Yep.
radiology is only spend $10 billion a year. How long is it going to take us to get to a stage where it is dependable and trustable?
That's a good question. I think the technology is growing enormously, but that doesn't answer the question of trust. And the question of trust will always be there until it's proven itself. And like you said, with pilots and with radiologists in the short term, we're only going to get to that level of development in AI by, in the short term, keeping a radiologist there until we've eventually trusted enough. So, and by the way, the numbers you put up about investment, they're only going to go up for radiology. You're saying there obviously is a big gap there in terms of investment, but they'll only go up because there is a huge value in it.
I totally agree with you there. The amount that's being spent on large language models is phenomenal, but they're still not trustable. And we're still spending a minuscule amount in medical imaging, but we expect them to be 100% correct. What's your thoughts on technology behind the two?
I think the money goes where the people's interest is and where you can see the immediate value. So, like you said, with large language models at the moment, so many people are interested and they can see so much potential. With radiology, I think there's a huge amount of potential, but it's apples and oranges here. I don't think you can compare the two. There's still a huge opportunity for AI in radiology to improve people's lives, and there'll still be money going to it. But it is an apples and oranges comparison. I don't think you should be expecting the same from both, even though the trust steps are going to be similar for both. Chee, next question for you. Does AI actually improve productivity, or does it just add complexity? For instance, here's a little nudge. How much reading time does AI realistically save per study? Is AI going to reduce burnout, or is it going to add alert fatigue? And last question for you that a radiology manager will be asking. If there are productivity gains, are they measurable and are they sustainable? What are your thoughts?
I think the jury is still out of that. And I'll give you an example. In my practice, we have a program that helps us interpret chest x-rays. It doesn't get everything correct all the time. Hence, we still need a radiologist to compare. As such, my workflow would be look at the chest x-ray, consider my findings, then look at the AI product, consider their findings, correlate their findings with what my findings are, issue a kind of consensus report, and fire that off. Previously, without AI, my workflow would have been look at the study and report my findings. So there's an extra step there that I didn't have previously. There's several extra steps. So it does slow me down currently. Why is that? I think it's a combination of trust and also interpretability. So chest x-rays, there's multiple different ways to interpret similar appearances. That is one issue. There are other products on the market where it's a very specific niche identification. So, for example, products to identify PE, where they have proven to be reasonably trustable in a finding which is a black and white finding. Is there a PE? Is there not a PE? That is a lot less grey with interpretation. And those kind of products have demonstrated increased productivity times, so increased turnaround times with reports. There's other studies available where it has demonstrated increase and decreases in turnaround time with some triage tools that are available as an AI product. So I think in this current environment where we're still very early, and we'll try and find our feet of what we can trust, what we can't trust with AI, you will find a mixture of increases in productivity and decreases in productivity.
Okay, so it depends on the value of the AI interpretation, and it depends on how that impacts workflow. And even though the example you gave where you looked at two types of information, your own and then the AI's feedback, that to me sounds like it's having two people in a human sense process, having two people look at it and then merging their information together. Now that's a lot of extra work, regardless of whether it's a person or a computer or an AI model that's being able to produce that information. So the value had better match the extra work. And it sounds like in some cases that value does provide enough benefit for the extra work, and the patient gets a better result, and you are able to remove risk from your analysis. But in some cases it doesn't. And so it depends on the level of quality of the technology, the workflow, and the use case.
Correct. Yes. I think we have done analysis previously on some of our products, and the increase in accuracy we have found in certain products does not offset the economic cost of liability for mistakes or time extra for the radiologist.
Okay, I think we need to go into some of those exact use cases in the future, but for now, let's move on to the next question. This is a big one, and it's potentially answered in some of the other questions we're asking. But will AI increase revenue, or is it just a cost center? How does it affect my bottom line? Now, here's some specific questions that fit under that category. Can I charge more if I'm using AI support? Are there billable AI use cases now? And if not, are they coming soon? And will there be more services that I can't provide today that I will be able to provide tomorrow using AI?
Look, Stephen, I think if AI currently was a profitable adventure, there would be a lot higher uptake in AI. Unfortunately, regulation lags behind technology sometimes, and in this use case, it probably does. A lot of that question also comes back to where you're located. So we're in Australia. There is no rebates from Medicare for AI products. So a chest X-ray reported with the AI product is reimbursed the same as a chest X-ray reported without an AI product. And so, unfortunately, it's a negative revenue drain because you have to pay for the AI product and you get paid the same amount of money for it. Now, in other countries such as South Korea, there is a rebates for AI products that provide extra information. And in limited cases in the US, there are some rebates. So depending on the product and depending on the country, you can see a small revenue increase. Now, how long before regulation and governments work out that AI can provide extra information that a human can't and can get reimbursed for that is how long is a piece of string, I think, at this moment in time. I'd love to see them move faster, but I'm not sure where they will.
You've made some really good points there, Chee. I normally think of the Australian health system as being great, and apparently by most measures it is. But in this case, we're calling an X-ray an X-ray an X-ray with exactly the same expectations and exactly the same quality expected for every situation. But obviously that's not the case. It's not like every single photography studio you go to charges the exact same for the exact same scenario. They are different and there's variable scenarios across that. In the same in radiology, it sounds like in America and other places, there is variability about what's going to get provided and there's variability about how that's going to get reimbursed. So maybe our health system in this case isn't the bee's knees, and there's some flexibility that's needed there to be able to encourage the additional services that can be provided with AI. Just my thoughts. And then go back to some of my questions I asked you before. We've talked about we're charging the same for a normal radiology scan. What about other services? Are you seeing any additional services being provided?
Yeah. I think what you're touching on there, Stephen, is when AI enables us to see things that a human radiologist can't see. For example, be able to screen for diseases that humans aren't able to see. Again, unfortunately, Australia is lagging behind the several other countries in this regard. So, for example, in South Korea, where you have products that screen for disease using AI tools, there is a rebate attached to that. And so that encourages development of AI products in the market and also encourages the use of AI products in South Korea. Similarly, in USA, there is small products available, targeted products that if they look for certain diseases, so for example, looking for osteoporosis in a CT, the insurance companies sometimes will pay a rebate for those kind of products. Again, accelerating the development of products in the market and also the uptake in the radiology companies.
Okay. So location seems like it's an issue here. And also the diversity of products and the regulation catching up to align to the diversity of products as regulation catches up. So for now, not a huge revenue increase, but we might get there soon. Next question, legal responsibility, Chee. Here's a big one. Who is legally responsible when AI goes wrong? For instance, if AI misses something or flags something incorrectly, who gets sued? If I was a clinic owner, I'll be worried about liability for false negatives and false positives, whether AI will increase or decrease malpractice risk, and do we need to document a misalignment between a radiologist and an AI recommendation?
It's a very gray area as we develop AI products. I think legally speaking, it's still the radiologist's responsibility, regardless of the product. But there have been research studies that have demonstrated, as you so rightly pointed, if there's a misalignment between the radiology interpretation and the AI interpretation, a negative outcome has occurred. The jury is a lot more likely to find fault with the radiologist than if an AI product was never used. So it brings a very interesting conundrum where, yes, the responsibility is shared, but if you have an AI product, you're going to put yourself more at risk of medical illegal than less at risk in some instances. Similarly, using the argument of, oh, look, the algorithm got it wrong, just doesn't fly. Similarly, if we're on a plane and the plane's going down, oh, the computer did it and we crashed, there's still the responsibility on the pilot to kind of save us.
I'm glad you used that analogy. That's exactly the one I was thinking. And it goes back to the point you had about there still being a pilot in a plane, despite the fact that the plane probably do 95% or more, maybe 100%. I'm not sure. We'll have to get a pilot on at one stage in the future to ask them. We still have a pilot there. So this is one of the reasons why. We have the radiologist who uses the AI as a tool, but are ultimately responsible. And until they're removed completely, it just keeps the status quo of the radiologist using it as a tool, take the information in and be able to make a decision about what they're doing with this extra information. It doesn't remove them from that responsibility that they currently have, which from my perspective sounds like I said, it keeps the status quo. Is that right?
I think it does keep the status quo of the radiologist still responsible. But I guess it does change the dynamic slightly in the sense that if you have AI, your standard of practice is held at a higher bar by the jury than if you never had AI in the first place. So it's supposed to help you make less mistakes, but if you do make a mistake, you're a lot more likely to be held accountable than if you never had AI. Which is
because it's giving you extra information. I get you. Okay. Are you seeing this in your practice day to day? Is this a concern?
No, Stephen, we haven't experienced this in our practice yet, but I believe that's because of how early we are in the AI development phase. We haven't seen a huge adoption in AI yet, partly because of availability, partly because of entrustability, but I suspect majority is due to financial reasons.
So let me jump in there, Chee. What I'm hearing is that this is a consideration, but we're jumping ahead of ourselves a bit. We're getting worried about it potentially coming up as an issue, and we're wary that it probably will, but at the moment, it's not impacting real practice.
Agreed. I think day-to-day practice in radiology continues to move as it is, but it is a great question that, as I believe in the future, when AI adoption increases, this is going to become an ever-increasing issue.
Okay, Chee, next great question. Will AI commoditize radiology, or will it protect its value? Or another way to put it, does AI make us in radiology more valuable or easier to replace? If I was an owner, I would be wary of the change in terms of my value moving from interpretation skill to speed and commoditization, integration, and making me high volume, low margin. And a follow-on question from that is, if I'm in a smaller practice, am I better or worse off? Does it change the smaller or larger practices dynamic? What do you think?
I think this remains a crystal ball, Stephen. I suspect that AI will make us more efficient. I think there'll be less radiologists required to do the same amount of work. Now, does that excite me? As a clinic owner, yes, it does. As a radiologist, I'd be concerned that I'm a lot more replaceable.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would think. From a technology perspective, I'm going to flip this around, Chee. There's a lot of people out there right now wearing shoes. But if you go back 200 years ago, there were some very high valued shoemakers out there that would have thought that they were getting pushed out. I see it as a natural progression for technology to become more available and for that to change the level of depth needed to be able to execute in that. But it doesn't make the shoe business any smaller. Now I have 10 pairs of shoes, whereas maybe 200 years ago, I might have had 2, and they're so much better and there's so much more value added to society. I think radiology will add so much more value to society, and everybody will have so many more shoes. I don't know if that's a perfect example, but we're going to, there's so much more value to add. And yes, it's going to change the level of knowledge needed for individuals, but as a group and as an industry, just like any other industry, change will come, but the value will increase.
I agree there. There is no point fighting it. I think it's been proven that AI being almost a second reader or triage tool, or being able to see things that radiologists can't see, can only help the patient. So I think there's no point trying to fight it and stop AI from developing and helping us as a radiologist. So I agree with you. I think it can only elevate radiology in the society and in healthcare.
Okay, great answering. Next curly one for you. Vendors. If we're going to be using all this technology, we currently use PAC systems, great, but they've become fairly ubiquitous and they generally do a very similar thing. In the future though, is there differentiation between AI vendors a worry for a practice manager? Are we going to become dependent on them? Am I locking myself and my business into someone else's roadmap?
We can always go back in history. Previously, there were a lot more vendors that made CT machines. Even the first company that made CT machines, do you know what that was?
No idea.
It was EMI Records.
Wow, that's
Yes.
a good story. EMI Records.
And they don't make CT machines anymore. But at one stage, we had lots of different vendors, and it's narrowed down to just a few. But regulation has made it such that they're interoperable with all the other different PACS machines, so with all the different PACS vendors. So I suspect in the future, yes, there will be a lot of different products, but they will be interoperable and you won't be locked down to a single vendor.
So in the short term, vendor choice is still important, just like it is with buying an X-ray machine or a CT scan or an MRI machine when it first came out. But eventually, over a period of time, regulation and industry means that those things become less of an issue.
Agreed.
And interoperability goes up. Next curly question for you. What does AI mean for quality, safety, and accreditation? And how will regulators and accrediting bodies get involved?
Stephen, I think AI in the future will be regulated more than it is at the moment. And I think we're seeing steps in the TGA and the FDA requiring further testing of these products to include diversity of population to ensure that the products work across the whole spectrum of ethnicities. So I suspect there will be increased regulation, which I think is a good thing, because if we're going to rely on these products to give us meaningful answers on a patient's health, they have to be tested and proven accurate. So I suspect in the future there will be further regulation, which I do welcome.
Okay. If I was a owner, I'll be watching that regulation and the accreditation bodies closely, because as an owner, I'm wary that I don't want to be too early and be putting myself into a situation with playing with immature tech, but I definitely don't want to be too late and losing ground in terms of quality and reputation and efficiency to my competitors. So I think that the regulation and accreditation bodies help provide a signpost and a confidence boost to owners and managers to be able to know when the time is right.
I think you're right there. I think going back to an early question you had, if you're a small company versus a large company, in some ways a small company can move fast, they're quite nimble, but the regulation hurdle for them might be a bit higher, and the implementation models and the costs might be a bit higher for a small company compared to a large company. So I wonder whether you'll find in the future small companies will find it harder to compete against large companies. So, for example, when COVID hit, there was a lot of COVID regulations with regards to spacing and staffing that we all had to navigate in any industry. Now, policies had to be drafted out. The policy for one company to draft out is the same whether you had 50 sites versus one site. So my concern is with the smaller companies, if they have to evaluate all these different products, a lot of regulatory that has to go involved to ensure compliance with their application of the products. One clinic versus 50 clinics, it's almost the same amount of work.
Yeah, okay, I see that. Effectively, the regulators and accreditors help signpost the right time as well as even out the playing field by pulling together, helping us make the answers to the size of the practice. Now, this is one of the biggest questions. If I, as a practice manager, do nothing, what's my risk in falling behind? Should I wait? Should I go? What are your thoughts?
My opinion on this question is partly based on where you are. If you're in South Korea or in parts of the USA and you're leaving revenue on the table by not implementing AI, you're already falling behind. In Australia, regulation reimbursement are behind some other countries. That doesn't mean that we don't use AI. There are products out there which have been proven to improve productivity, improve turnaround times, improve accuracy. So you have to look out for those, because if you don't have those installed, you're slightly behind the 8 ball with regards to implementation and also administrative and computing.
I would agree with you, Chee. As much as I'd love to say AI is awesome today, it's not. It seems to be that there are, like we spoke about earlier, some workflow interaction components that still need to be worked out. You know, all the questions we talked about, liability and is it really making extra revenue, et cetera, et cetera. But it's obviously coming. So I would have thought that you'd want to have some involvement in the technology in the areas where it makes sense. So I think you and I are in agreement.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Chee. You've been a great sport.
You've asked some great, challenging questions today, Stephen.
But that's my job, mate. And thank you for listening. If you've got other questions for Chee or for me, please put them in the comments section below. Please also join us again in the future for another episode of MIAI, covering all your AI technology and radiology topics. And as always, subscribe, follow, and join the conversation. Thanks.